would if they were inside of a building where others are looking at them and they have to put themselves out there. If you just provide an opportunity for them to reach out to you via text message or email, I've discovered that there are people who are willing and ready to indicate their need, whether it's special, utilize virtual appeals. I'm telling you, if your mind inside of the amount of people who, when given an inconspicuous opportunity to identify their need, they will respond. Building where others are looking at them and they have to put themselves out there. If you just provide an opportunity for them nothing to reach out to people who don't there and utilize online revival. God bless you.
Hola, soy el pastor Ever López, pastor de la iglesia hispana de West Palm Beach, y me va a estar traduciendo en este día Barclay Jurado, ministro de música de nuestra iglesia.
Hi, my name is Heber Lopez, senior pastor of West Palm Beach SDA Spanish Church, and today I have our music minister Barclay Jurado doing the translation for me.
En el año 2017 comenzamos un programa intensivo a los grupos pequeños para que cada familia, cada hogar de nuestra iglesia pudiera tener un grupo en su hogar.
Back in 2017, we started an intensive program with small groups in houses to provide our members to have a small group on each house.
Logramos tener más de 30 grupos pequeños, conquistadores, ministerio de la mujer, jóvenes, todos los ministerios, diáconos, tenían sus grupos pequeños y además familias de la iglesia, los cuales reunían entre 15 y 20 personas por grupo.
We put together almost 30 small groups, so almost each ministry of the church had his own group, small group.
Esto creó un gran despertar entre los hermanos, los cuales traían a sus familiares, a sus vecinos, a nuestra iglesia, y en ese periodo el 17 y el 20 tuvimos nuestra iglesia casi 200 bautismos.
Bringing friends, neighbors, we almost had 200 people, new people.
Había algunas cosas específicas que queríamos en los grupos, pero había una libertad según el grupo para que ellos decidieran cómo llevarlo a cabo. Pero había algo específico y era tocar a las personas, eran las relaciones, era desarrollar una afinidad con aquella persona que llegara.
Each group has its own individual style of working on as a small group. We allow them to had a program and had a personal experience with each individual. We didn't have a specific program for all the groups. It's how to reach people.
Cuando estamos en el tope de este programa y pensando seguir adelante, llega el COVID y el lema, quédate en casa.
So at the peak of the program, when we were having so much success, our logo changed now to stay home.
Esto trajo todo este programa de grupos pequeños.
They put a big hold in our program due to the pandemic.
La iglesia, viendo de qué forma podíamos nuevamente llegar a los hogares de nuestros hermanos.
So we sit down with the evangelical ministries to see what we're going to be our next step through the pandemic.
Así que comenzamos un programa de grupos pequeños a través de Zoom.
So we switched to a Zoom, and instead of being together with all the the membership and friends, we turn into Zoom programs and to help our groups stay together.
Una de esas de viernes que teníamos el programa de Zoom.
Interesting, one when we were having our Zoom meetings, this guy connected to our program through Zoom.
El siguiente martes estuve en su hogar con el director de evangelismo de la iglesia para visitar a este joven.
So the next Tuesday, I went to his house to visit the person.
Y nos encontramos que él vivía con 3 hermanas más y su esposa venía desde México en unos meses.
We found out he lived with another 3 sisters and the wife that was on his way from Mexico.
Él y sus hermanas estaban alejados de la iglesia por muchos años.
They were away from church for years.
Comenzamos a visitarlo y en su hogar ya de forma presencial decidieron abrir un grupo pequeño.
So they decided to open a group at their house.
Al día de hoy, él, su esposa y 2 de sus hermanas fueron bautizadas en nuestra iglesia en los pasados meses.
We can gladly say today that him, the sisters, and the wife are baptized and attending to this church.
El programa de grupos pequeños es efectivo para uno poder llegar a las personas, para uno poder saber cómo tocar a las personas y qué necesidad tienen.
That's what it's the small groups about. It's to get closer to people, touch them, and bring them to Christ.
Llegó el momento en el cual las personas ya no podían, no resistían conectarse a Zoom porque todo en su trabajo, en la escuela, donde quiera, era a través de la computadora en Zoom. Así que, ¿qué hacemos ahora?
We got to a point that everything that was happening, it was happening through Zoom meetings. So people were getting tired of getting in Zoom because of work. You have to go into online. School, you have to be online. So we sit down and say, hey, what are we going to do next?
Y en este momento,
So now we're working and developing the next step, what we're going to do next in order to keep our small groups going.
no importa qué esté pasando en el mundo,
Doesn't matter what's going on in the world.
nosotros necesitamos reinventarnos.
We have to do new stuff in order to get to our people.
Necesitamos crear,
We need to create
porque la gente necesita que vayamos a ellos.
because the people need us to go to them.
En el mes de diciembre, enero y los 2 primeros sábados de febrero,
Last November, December, and the first 2 months of the year, January and February,
nuestra iglesia ha bautizado más de 16 almas,
our church has baptized more than 16 souls,
resultado de los grupos pequeños,
results of the small groups.
resultado de poder llegar a las personas que en medio de esta necesidad quieren buscar a Jesús.
So we could reach people in need and on these times of pandemic.
Quédate en casa,
Stay home.
¿ok?
Okay.
La iglesia no puede detenerse.
The church won't stop.
La iglesia no puede parar.
The church won't stop again.
La iglesia necesita reinventarse.
We're going to do new stuff.
Y los grupos pequeños
And the small groups,
nunca deben detenerse.
they should never stop working.
Es una herramienta clave
It's a key. It's a key element
en el cual la iglesia en la semana
in which the church every week
comparte alimento,
share food.
sabe cómo va en el trabajo su vecino,
They know what's happening around our neighbors.
sabe qué necesidad tiene su amigo,
What are the needs of our friends?
puede escuchar la necesidad de otras personas.
Listen, what are their needs?
No podemos detener los grupos pequeños
We cannot stop our small groups.
porque es parte de nuestra misión.
It's a vital part of our mission.
Y en nuestra iglesia en West Palm Beach
And our church in West Palm Beach
es parte de nuestro ADN.
is part of our ADN.
Dios te bendiga
May
en
God
este día.
May God bless you on this day.
Y que en tu iglesia los grupos pequeños,
And in your church, those small groups,
no importa qué esté pasando en el mundo,
doesn't matter what's going on in the world right now,
crea algo,
start creating something.
porque puedes llegar
Because you can
en tu ciudad
achieve in your city
al hogar
to those houses, homes,
de cualquier persona que necesite a Jesús.
of any house that needs Jesus.
Dios te bendiga.
May God bless you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone, for your presentations. Everybody, thank you for your comments that you're putting in the comment section, as well as some questions. We've got some questions that we're going to be asking some of these speakers in just a few minutes, but we want to get into the poll questions again, Jose. We want your feedback. We've got several quick questions that we want to give to you, whether you're joining us on Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube. We'd love to be able to get your responses for us. So here's our first poll question. What method of proclamation do you find most effective to reach your community? Which method do you use most often or most effective? The full prophecy series, the weekend evangelism over several weeks, the sabbatical evangelism, that's where every Sabbath is an evangelistic event, small group evangelism, personal Bible studies, vacation Bible school, or something other. So pick one, the one that is most effective for you to reach your community. Select that right there, and we will see how those results come up.
And if you are on Facebook or on YouTube, just write it out on the chat. Write it out on the
Type
chat.
it right in there.
Those who are on chat on the Zoom chat, you can vote. But if you're on Facebook or YouTube, take time to write it out. All right.
All right, looks like the results are coming in. Quickly put them in. Looks like small groups, Sabbath, and personal Bible studies are the three. Looks like small groups is leading the way for the most part.
Let's see. Well, let's give it a few more moments. And if you vote only once, all right? Only once. I know some of our pastors here would like to vote more than one. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm not sure if you can go more than one.
I don't think you can.
The full prophecy series is the least one. And Vacation Bible School. Boy, Vacation Bible School is an amazing evangelistic event if you use it so. So hopefully you'll check that out.
And I would like to see those of you who are writing other, those of you who are voting for other, if you're voting for other, please let us know on the chat, in Zoom, also in Facebook or YouTube. Let us know which those other ones are, because
right in there.
We can all learn from that. You see, we can all learn from that. And Tim, you know what's the great thing? That we do not need to use Saul's armor.
That's right.
Okay, let's do, pastors, what works for us. Now you saw 5 different approaches. Okay, right. 5 different pastors, all successful, doing different things.
Yeah, and you're trying to reach your community, and there may be a methodology that's best for that community. So you might have to adapt things in order for it to most effectively work for where you are serving.
All right, so we're ready to close that poll question. All right, give us the final results. Let's see it right here. What are the final results? If we can put them on the screen.
Looks like small groups.
Small groups, number 1.
39%.
Number 2, personal Bible studies, Tim.
Followed by Sabbath evangelism at 16%.
And other, all right, very good.
And then prophecy series, weekends, the beach got 6. So
very good, very good. All right, very good. Now let's go to question number 2. And this question is not for you to vote. This question is for you to tell us on the chat.
Type it right in there.
Get your fingers ready so you can give us some of these answers on the chat. What are the topics that have proven, listen up, topics that have proven to connect better with your audience? Please tell us on the chat. So quickly, if it is the state of the dead, if it is the Sabbath, if it is health, what are the topics? Give it to us right now. We want to see them on the chat. The same for those of you who are on Facebook, and for those of you who are on, I'm watching him Facebook right here, and for those of you who are on YouTube. All right, so just write them on the chat. Tim, which one do you think is the most, as a pastor, which one was the one that...
You know, Sabbath actually became a really big, popular one in the past few years. People really were overworking too much, and it really resonated with people when they understood the day of rest, and they're just stopping, that ceasing, really resonated with a lot of people.
That is beautiful. I've also, one of the ones that has worked the best for me has been forgiveness. When I talk about the forgiveness that God gives to you, and then how he expects you to forgive others, you know. So that's a very touchy and very emotional subject because a lot of us.
And understanding the difference between forgiveness and forgetting, yeah.
All right,
Powerful.
very good, very good. And now, team, that's the last question.
Next poll question. All right, we're going to bring up another poll for you. When was the last time your church had a purely evangelistic event? Now, this may not be a full-on prophecy series, but whatever you would categorize as this event was for the purpose of evangelism, reaching the unchurched or bringing people to Christ, a purely evangelistic event within the last year, a few weeks ago, or I don't even remember. So pick one of those. Hopefully we can get that poll question up there. Looks like
And
we
we're
have
dealing with question number 2 now. I see some people still answering question number 1. We already did that one. We're question number 2. When was the last time? All right, so let's go to the next one, to the second question.
All righty.
Let me see.
Do we have that poll question?
It's on, but I think people are answering the first one.
I see the first one still on there, yeah.
So we're trying to do the second one.
All right, well, if we can't get that second poll up there, just type right into your chat which answer within the last year, a few years ago, or I don't even remember. Whichever one best applies to you, just type that. And everybody can kind of see those results of the new poll.
Okay.
Questions in the chat that we have us here in Zoom, and hopefully we can cut them over to the other platforms as well. Just a couple of questions that we want to be able to ask some of our presenters. So our first question, David, is for you. Can we bring David up, please? Make sure his mic is active. David talked about the public series and calling people to make decisions for that. Do we have David up? I know I see him online. Looks like he. Awesome. All right, David, here's my question for you. A lot of people visitation is key. So how do we help overcome?
Well, that's where we get out of the traditional thing. I think it's much more effective, but when you can't do that, during meetings is when you make a point to be talking to people as much as you can. You know, you connect with them, you invite them if they want to talk. So you can visit just as much there in the church or a church office, spread out as much as you like. If people were more comfortable with masks, that's fine. But there's thousands of opportunities and ways to connect besides just, going to someone's home.
Very good. Awesome. And next question.
David, I have one more question for you, and this one comes from Audrey Thomas. And you talked about minimizing and maximizing. Couldn't minimizing the net could have people read baptism?
No, I don't think so, because you may talk about that in the sermon itself. There's not that you don't talk about the reality of challenges and obstacles that people will face. You may mention that in the sermon. But during the appeal part, that's not when you want to focus on that. That's when you want to focus on the blessings of that decision. It's not that you skip over it altogether, but that's not what you're going to focus on in the appeal.
Okay,
Very
excellent,
good.
very good.
Thank you.
All right, let's go now with Ruben Rios, Pastor Ruben, all the way in San Diego. And my man in San Diego is probably early. I see Ruben, you're right there. So we can unmute Ruben. It's so good to see you here, my brother. I wish you were here in person as well. Or better yet, team, I wish we were in San Diego in person, all right? So if we can have Ruben on the screen right now, this question is for Ruben. Ruben, you talked about a few different resources that can be used in order to improve your experience and in order to improve your reach. The question here is, could you tell us a little bit more about text in church? What is text in church? Some people were asking the question, what is text in church?
Yeah, sure, man. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Text in Church is a resource that we've been using for quite a while now. In fact, I started using it when I was up in Oakland and brought it here to San Diego. And it's a resource that you can get online. There is a fee for it, but what it is basically is a text texting network that allows you to connect with members of your church, but also more importantly, for guests and people who are coming for the first time. And it's a great method to just stay consistently after people. And you don't have to do the work. You submit their name into it, and it just does everything for you. It will send them weekly text messages, emails that are automated already that you can set up. It's just another method, another way to get people to know that you care about them and that you want to see them come back to your church. And it has definitely worked for us. We have seen evidence of that by using this resource called Text in Church. And they're really good too. They have some great helpful tools. They have tutorials. They constantly do conferences that they put together that will help you, connect with people, win people to Christ.
Roman, that's a great answer. And please, could you on the chat give us a little bit of perhaps a link or something? I don't know if you could do that, but put that link on the chat for pastors and church leaders who are trying to replicate some of the things that you talked to us about. Thank you so much, my brother. Much love for you. A big hug, all right?
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, we're going to go on to James. James, I got a couple quick questions for you. Let's make sure that James is on and unmuted here so that he can follow up. James, I love the online experience. That's something that we were doing before COVID, we were preparing for, and then obviously when COVID hit, many of us were kind of forced to do that. But I like how you are being intentional about it. It's not an accidental thing, it's an intentional thing. One of the questions that we've had come in is related to community. How, once somebody goes through the online revival or evangelistic series, how do they then connect to a local church, or do they connect to a local church? And if so, or if not, how do you create a community when you're experiencing with people on Facebook, YouTube, or some other online platform?
Absolutely. So those are some great questions. I'll first say that when it comes to connecting them with local congregations, that is the initial, question is, where are they located? Because we don't want to just relegate them exclusively to the virtual space. We continue to, connect with them with the various ministries we offer online, but we still do want to connect them locally. That's the beautiful part about being a part of this denomination, is that we have connections all over the country and all over the globe. So we are intentional about connecting them to local congregations, especially if they want to get baptized, have Bible study, whatever their needs are. We try to make sure that those needs are met by connecting them to a local congregation. And in terms of the creation of community online, we just are intentional about, with our digital discipleship team, which we mentioned, in keeping contact with them. We are consistent with offering ministerial opportunities, and we try to make sure that we reach out to them consistently, so that they know that we're here for them, not just during the time of revival while people are preaching and singing and all of that, but we're here to walk with them and journey with them in whatever ways we can.
Beautiful, beautiful. I would really recommend that people don't just look at the online experience as a necessity because of COVID, but be intentional about it. You have the opportunity, as you were saying, to reach people that you would not normally have the ability to reach. So beautiful. Thank you so much.
And James, there is a question that came up here. Someone missed number 4. You gave us 10 tips in 10 minutes. So I don't know if you have it right there, right on the top of your head, or if you can just type it on the chat, but whichever one works for us, man. Someone missed number 4,
Sure.
and we wanted to make sure that we give it to them, all right?
Yes, number 4 is leverage your connections. And the idea there was, even if you don't have a budget that's dedicated for marketing and all of these other needed steps in the process, people. And what you want to do is just reach out to them, ask them if they'll assist you in sharing the links, sharing the flyers, and people who you know and love. I promise you, they'll respond and they'll do their part in expanding your network by putting that information out there for their people within their influence to see, and then of course engage in the offerings that you are providing.
James, and one last thing. I know that you're about to begin another quarantine or a pandemic revival. Okay, I think, or either began already or it's about to begin. And I know that, so tell us a little bit more about that. And I would love, do not share the the graphic here because something could go wrong with our settings. But if you could put it on the chat, okay,
Absolutely.
because people want to know about this. All right, so tell us quickly what's going on. What's the quarantine revival that is either beginning tonight or began already? Talk to us a little bit about it for a few moments.
Absolutely. So tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific, we are launching our quarantine revival at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific with Pastor Clifton Davis. He's going to be bringing a word entitled, "You Can Do It." We have preachers like U.S. Chaplain Dr. Barry Black. We have Pastor Whitley Phipps, who's going to be preaching. We have my father, Dr. James Doggett Sr., who's
You're
going to be
talking
joining
about
us.
that Dr. James Doggett Sr.? You're talking about that? All right.
Yes,
have mercy.
that gentleman, he'll be with us and he's moderating. And every night we have co-hosts who are going to be with us, joining us. And we have, President Abraham Jules up there in Northeastern, who's going to be delivering the word. So we have a lot of people who are going to be joining us. And tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific, join us on the platforms, the Quarantine Revival, YouTube and Facebook. We're going to have a good time just lifting up and exalting Jesus. And we encourage each of you to come. And if there are any questions that you have about the process, intro videos, outros, flyers, the whole nine, anything that we have, I'm more than willing to share. So reach out to me and we'll give you whatever it is that we can give you to help propel you into the new dimension of spiritual power in the virtual space.
Beautiful.
That is awesome. If you can put the info on the chat, that way people will be able to get in touch with you. And now I'm going to ask this question in Spanish. This is for Ever Lopez, and I will be doing the translation here. So I'm going to say it in English first, and then I'm going to repeat it in Spanish. But Ever, someone is asking the question, did you say that you baptized 200 people without doing evangelistic meetings? Tú nos acabas de decir que bautizaste 200 personas en los últimos años sin hacer una campaña de evangelismo. ¿Es eso verdad? ¿Es eso posible? Is that possible to baptize 200 without an evangelistic meeting? Dinos, tell us.
Mira, cada sábado para nosotros es una campaña evangelística.
Okay, every Sabbath for us is an evangelistic series.
Nosotros, el sistema de grupos pequeños funciona como sistema evangelístico de la iglesia.
Our small groups are an evangelistic system. That's the way it functions.
Preparamos líderes que entrenamos como evangelistas para que semanalmente vayan a la ciudad, a los grupos pequeños a predicar.
We prepare leaders as evangelists so they can lead out in these small groups. So they go into the homes and they lead the small groups as the evangelistic series in the home.
La gente que asiste a los grupos viene el sábado a la iglesia.
So the people that go to the small groups, they also get invited to come to church on Sabbath.
La iglesia el sábado se convierte en el cierre de una campaña evangelística cada sábado.
So every Sabbath, the church service is the closing of an evangelistic series, every Sabbath.
Nosotros llevamos ahora mismo más de 7 sábados bautizando cada sábado.
Now with the last 7 Sabbaths we have baptisms every Sabbath for the last 7 Sabbaths.
Beautiful.
Cuando comienzo a predicar, digo, tengo libre tal sábado y tal sábado que no tengo bautismo. Así que si alguien se decide, me contacta.
When I
cuando
begin
termino
to
de
preach,
predicar,
he says, when I begin to preach, right away, right off the front, I say, right at the beginning, I say, I have the following Sabbaths open for baptisms. I don't have anybody to baptize on those Sabbaths. So if anybody is wanting to, those Sabbaths are open. Ha ha.
cuando termino de predicar, el equipo evangelístico en la puerta saludando me dice, pastor, ya tiene ocupado tal día, tenemos bautismo.
So when he finishes preaching and people are exiting the church, the evangelistic team, his elders and the small group leaders, they tell him, Pastor, someone already reached out for this Sabbath, so we already have a baptism this Sabbath, and the following one, those Sabbaths are taken.
Nice.
Este sábado tenía 2 bautismos y terminamos con 4 porque una muchacha llamó que nos está escuchando hace varios meses y vino específicamente a la iglesia a bautizarse.
This last Sabbath, we had 2 baptisms, but we ended up having 4 because there is a young lady that has been paying attention to us and listening to our YouTube programs, and she came to church specifically to get baptized, and she got baptized.
Nice.
Y otra muchacha que nos visita hace como 3 años.
And another
y
young
este
lady that has
sábado
been
vino.
visiting for the last 3 years, she also came to church.
En el mes de noviembre, su esposo me llamó y me dijo, pastor, yo soy ateo.
In the month of November, her husband called and said, Pastor, I am an agnostic, I am an atheist.
Pero la ropa que mi not-profit reparte, yo quiero que la iglesia sea la que la reparta a la comunidad.
But the clothing that my non-profit organization gives away, I want the church to be the one that gives it away.
Porque yo sé que ustedes no se roban las cosas.
Because I know that you guys don't rob, that you guys don't steal things. So I would like for you guys to be the people that give away the clothing that my non-profit gives away.
Quiere decir que nosotros les repartimos la ropa a los not-profit aún de ateos.
So we give away clothing even from the non-profit organizations owned by atheists.
Wow.
So we work.
La ciudad conoce la iglesia a través de los grupos pequeños, del servicio a la comunidad.
The city knows the church as a result of the small groups and our community services.
Todo el que viene a la iglesia el sábado se encuentra con un cierre de una campaña evangelística.
And everyone that comes to church every Sabbath encounters an evangelistic series.
Nice.
Buena música, un sermón cristocéntrico y un llamado.
Great music, a Christ-centered sermon, and an appeal. Muchas gracias, Herbert. Thank you so much. That is wonderful. God bless you,
Beautiful.
man.
Beautiful.
God bless you.
I
So,
love-
Tim,
I love it. Listen, before we move on,
we got to finish, but what's good? Tell me.
You'd asked about the questions, the topics that people find they connect better with. We've got a few responses. I just want to read them real quick. Some said conflict management, relationships, and how to. The 3 angels' messages, the sanctuary, revelation, family, and then somebody else said the sanctuary as well. So
Oh,
those are some of the
beautiful.
topics that they seem to relate.
We have so many takeaways, and we want for you to put them on the chat. Whatever takeaways you had for this session number 2, just write it down on the chat. But we're going to mention some of the ones that we got, and we're going to put some of them on the screen. So if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or on Zoom, please give us your takeaway on the chat. Write it down for us. We want to keep those. Tim, what are some of the ones we got?
Some of the ones we have is our proclamation would address practical solutions to human needs. What if our proclamation would address practical solutions to human needs?
And what if our messages will always emphasize the good news, the positives?
The good news.
Right.
And what if our preaching and teaching were always followed by an invitation to make a decision?
And what if every church gathering, not just the preaching and the teaching, but every church gathering would lead to some sort of appeal? All right, so those are some of our takeaways as we close today.
I hope you've been challenged today to think outside the box as to what's going to be most effective to reach people in your community with the love and message of Jesus Christ.
And Tim, we're about to finish right now. We're going to give you guys a 30-minute lunch break, and we're going to get a lunch break here as well.
Yep.
But we're going to be back right at 2 p.m. We're coming back right at 2 p.m.
Eastern Time.
All right, so in half an hour, we're coming right back. And we have a closing prayer for this session number 2 for the first part of our huddle today by Pastor Eugene Kidney, one of the pastors at the Arlington Church. Pastor Eugene, can you close us with prayer for this session?
Will do. Most gracious Father in heaven, we are so grateful and thankful for the opportunity to be blessed with these presentations. Lord, things that have maybe we've heard before, but it's just bringing us back to basics, some new things that we've learned. And Lord, it is my prayer that as we meditate on it now during our break, may we continue to focus on reach, reclaim, and retain. Lord, may we be open to not just doing what we've done before, but may we be open and ready to do new things for Jesus. May we reinvent ourselves to reach others for the kingdom. Bless us now, Lord, as we take a break, and we look forward to more later on, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We'll see you back in 30
See you
minutes.
at 2 o'clock. Take care.
who say they are familiar with the church. Another 22% say they have never heard of Seventh-day Adventist Church or have heard of it but have no opinion, along with a relatively large group of 33% who choose the neutral category. What this means is this: about an estimate of 30 to 40% of Americans are familiar or know enough to have an opinion on our church. The rest either have a vague notion of the church or no opinion at all. Now, let's take a look at how Americans see Adventist Church in terms of favorability. This chart shows how favorable or unfavorable Americans are toward the Seventh-day Adventist Church. As you see here in this chart, their attitudes toward the Seventh-day Adventist Church are more negative than positive. 8% of Americans have a favorable opinion about us, compared to 34% with an unfavorable view. So there is a difference of 26% between favorable and unfavorable ratio. Gallup analysis are telling us that this net minus 26% ratio is not unusual for religious groups in the United States among those who participate in these surveys. Yet we feel that we have many hard works to do in the future in this regard. As you can see here in this chart, 9 of the 17 religious groups tested in this research, including our church, have a net negative image. We find ourselves in the lower half of the group, but not at the bottom end. What is interesting to observe is that we have less unfavorable rating than evangelical Protestants by 7%. Where we are weak is in how favorable we are to Americans. Ours is only at 8%, while evangelical Protestants are at 19%. Among Americans who participate in this survey, 8 of the religious entities are viewed more positively than negatively. Their positive ranges are anywhere between 29% and 3%. We are on the negative side. This is one metric we can use to measure whether we are successful in our branding efforts. We'd like to see us on the positive side than the negative side on this chart. Let's move to the area of image. Not surprisingly, the most frequently occurring words when Americans are asked their top of the mind image of our church are Saturday and Sabbath. This is regardless of the level of their familiarity or favorable versus unfavorable image of the church. Our doctrine of Saturday worship clearly comprises a significant component of Americans' image of our church. We need to find ways to maximize this image within the context of the contemporary society. Yes, Sabbath has its perennial doctrinal significance in our faith. At the same time, if presented in ways that address the needs of contemporary society, it could be much more impactful than it is now. We got to engage various discussions about how to bring the message and significance of Sabbath to the 21st century American society. If we go back to the both 1970 and 1986 study done by Gallup, we see the same image of our church portrayed to the eyes of the American public as we see in the recent 2021 studies. Let's pause here to see what kind of responses we received from the 1970 and 1986 surveys on this topic, respectively. In the 1970 study, we see people appreciated us being loyal to our church and missionary activities we were engaged in. In the 1986 study, we see people still appreciating our strong faith and our moral character. They also like us in seeing us helping the neighbors. However, vast majority of people did not form any opinion about us. Let's go back to the 2021 study. Among those extremely or very familiar with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the following words were used to describe our church: Christ, Jesus, cult, vegetarian, Ellen, food, restriction, white. We are happy to see that besides Sabbath, two words mostly associated with us are Christ and Jesus. I believe we have been successful in letting people outside of the church see that our faith is centered around Jesus Christ. Among those with an unfavorable opinion of the Adventist Church, the following words were frequently mentioned about our church: cult, strict, conservative, and evangelical, vegetarian, and rules. We may not agree with some of the words associated with us. What this list shows is the area that we need to work hard to have a better image here in North America. Let's briefly go back to where we were in 1970 and 1986, respectively, in this regard. In the 1970 study, American public were saying to us that they don't like our methods of converting members. And we are portrayed as old-fashioned, narrow-minded. In the study done 1986, we see 8% of people not liking us because of our religious beliefs or aggressiveness in our approach of evangelism. This aggressiveness may reflect the practice that we used to have in the past. It is probably safe to say that that is no longer the case. Let's go back to 2021 study as I closed my presentation. The 2021 survey finds that the themes of wholeness and developing a sense of hope have significant appeal to Americans based on their personal importance as well as in terms of their appeal if emphasized by a church. In other words, our mission statement that is to reach North America and the world with our distinctive Christ-centered message of hope and wholeness is well crafted and right on target. We just need to find the better and effective ways to make it a reality in our community. Gallup also tested several positioning associated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church on a blinded basis in the research. Those that engender particularly positive responses include an emphasis on physical health, diet, and spiritual health, an emphasis on wholeness, completion, and purpose in life, an emphasis on a connection with the healthcare organization, an emphasis on the Bible as the holy written word of God. These are the areas that people are interested in these days. As you can see, we have so many potential strengths in us. These strengths can be effectively used in reaching out our target audience. When we maximize these potentials in our approach, our churches are going to find themselves much closer to people outside of the church and filled with people finding the meaning of their life on this earth. These surveys that we conducted shows that we have work to do in terms of our brand awareness. At the same time, this survey also shows that we are on the right track in terms of our mission. Our mission statement, emphasizing hope and wholeness, strikes a chord among Americans. We need to find better ways to maximize our strengths, thereby bringing our message of hope and wholeness closer to millions of people here across North America. We are Seventh-day Adventists. We love this church. We want to see the message of this church more widely embraced by people here in North America. Our task is to find ways to make that a reality together toward that noble mission God has placed in us.
Hi, I'm Alan Parker, and I'm a professor at Southern Adventist University, and I'm excited to share with you today a result of a survey that I conducted among former young adult Adventists. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about that time period. It's such an exciting time period for a young person. You're deciding what you're going to do, you're deciding who you're going to marry, you're maybe building a family, you're reinventing ideas, your mind is expanding, your social network is expanding. But as a result of that, there's also some deconstruction. Why do I believe what I believe? Is this even relevant to my life? Is this a faith community that I want to be part of? And unsurprisingly, a number of people decide that they no longer want to be part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So we're doing something new. We're doing a Slido, sli.do, and you can participate by putting in the number 222702, and you'll be able to answer some of the questions that I'm putting out there. And so my first question is, what percentage of young people leave the church? Now, we know that for the average Seventh-day Adventist, 40% of Seventh-day Adventists end up leaving the faith. But what is that for young people? And you know what the statistic in America, based on some of the 10, this is not just a lost sheep, 1 in 100. This is of 100. This is not a lost sheep. This is a lost flock. An entire generation is being lost. Now, they may be on the books, but that doesn't mean they're in the pews. And if you look at most churches, you'll discover that the missing age group is between 18 and 35. So when I was in London, I was on the underground, and I noticed when I got off the train that there would be this mind the gap. And what it meant was there was a gap next to the train you had to be careful not to fall into. Well, is there a gap in the Seventh-day Adventist Church that young adults into and people? So in the survey that I did of former Adventists, those who are no longer attending church, nearly half of my respondents were under the age of 35, which is just unusual for most surveys. You don't get that high of a response from that age group. It means that they're invested in this. I had over 700 responses. And not only did I have about half from under the age of 35, but the next up age group, 35 to 44, I had about 25%. So almost 75% were under the age of 45. And I wanted to know, why did you leave the church? These were people no longer in church. Why did you leave? Now, this survey is going to be different from the results that you've heard from the general worldwide survey, because this was North America and it was mainly young adults. And so some of the reasons why you've heard why people leave are going to be shown up to be different here. So why do people leave the church? That's Slido 222702. Put in your answer. And here was my surprising finding. I found that most young adults left because of doctrinal disagreements. That may not be true for others, but for young adults, they're saying, I don't agree with the doctrines of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, there may be other reasons why they left, but this was one of the primary reasons. Over 50% said that they left because of doctrinal reasons. The second reason was hypocrisy of church members. They just found the church judgmental. They also said it was boring, that they felt that they didn't get support. They said maybe there was an abuse situation that went on that caused them to leave. Only after all of these reasons do we get to relationship conflict, which was what was indicated in the worldwide Adventist Church survey on former members. So here, young adults are telling us how I think is important to me, how people relate to me, and whether they have integrity is important to me. Is there abuse, and how's it handled? That's important to me. And these are issues we must deal with young adults. In fact, I want to suggest to you 4 ways in which we can mind the gap, 4 ways in which we can prevent young adults from falling through the gaps based on the survey that I conducted. And the first way is what I call the rationality gap. We have struggled to make our beliefs rational. What one young person wrote was, I am finding cognitive dissonance. Once you escape the cave, these are their words, and learn what the shadows really are, you can't be talked back into the cave. Another young person said, I have become an atheist. Over the course of 3 years or so, I have considered arguments and evidence from both sides and decided through great pain and anxiety, because I'm going to lose some relationships, that I no longer believe in any God or supernatural phenomenon. Another person said, my experience in the Adventist church has been brainwashing. I've endured this brainwashing and it has marred my view of God. They're finding cognitive dissonance between the Adventist beliefs and what they consider their rational beliefs. Like, it's the idea that there are just logic holes. This is stupid and you can't fix stupid. People are saying, I see these logical holes and I believe there's no room for questioning. We are fundamentally misunderstood, one young person says. And I think that I need some answers. I believe the Adventist church misuses the Bible and denies science. Another young person said, I see conspiracies in the church. Another one said, it's highly unlikely that I'll return. Maybe if the church embraced science more thoroughly, it would help. And so others were saying, why is it that we have a woman leader in Ellen White, but we're afraid to allow women to minister? Just questions. It doesn't make logical sense to some of these young adults. And so in a prior study that we had done, this was 2014, we had looked at Adventist doctrines and what young adults' agreements was with Adventist doctrines, and we found they were pretty much in agreement with creation and salvation, and even that the Ten Commandments still applied today, and the Sabbath and the Trinity. But where there was disagreement was on things like the Adventist church is the last day remnant church, that you need to marry somebody in the faith, that 1844 and the pre-Advent judgment was biblical, that the pre-Advent judgment defined who God was, Ellen White and the gift of prophecy. There were some fundamental disagreements with these doctrines. And have we done a good job of explaining these things? Have we helped young adults to rationally process their faith? Now, it's very interesting. Barna did a study on Adventist millennials, and they compared that with a study that they had done on Christian millennials. And they discovered with Christian millennials, for instance, that there were 6 areas that Christian millennials had problems with religion. They said, for instance, religion is intolerant of doubt, that's exclusive, it's anti-science, it's overprotective, it's shallow, it's repressive. And by Christian religion, they meant their Christian faith. And then they compared this with how Adventists responded to questions on these things about the Adventist church. And here was the shocking result. On every category, Adventist millennials saw their church in more negative light than did Christian millennials. They said it is intolerant of doubt. It was almost 3 times higher than what it was for Christian millennials. They said it was exclusive. They said it was anti-science. Every single category, the Adventist millennials rated the Adventist church worse than the Christian millennials rated their Christian church. Well, that's shocking. That shows us we need to do something to make our beliefs not only understandable, but to encourage dialogue, to encourage thoughtful thinking about what does this mean? How do I understand this? How do I relate to this? Does this make logical sense? My wife has written a series of books that is intended for young people, and it starts with family worship. And so she's written these books trying to show how Adventist doctrines can be relevant to their life. And here's the thing that she believes. Doctrines need to be experienced, only make logical sense, but we need to understand how those doctrines relate to our lives. So she wrote a book on the sanctuary that didn't deal with where all the pieces of the furniture go, but instead, how does the sanctuary doctrine make a practical difference in my life? So the first gap we're going to have to deal with is this rational gap. Can we make sense of the doctrines? The second gap we're going to have to deal with is the authenticity gap, that we find young adults are saying, this really just doesn't make sense in my life because the people I'm watching, they are not authentic. They don't have integrity. Here's a quote that came in from the survey. Part of what led me to questioning in the first place was that there was so much hypocrisy in the church. Also that many members held very troubling and unethical beliefs. Another person said, not everyone who stops attending disbelieves Adventist theology or got hurt. We may just find the denomination increase small. Now, the way we fix authenticity is by having true identity, by knowing who we really are. We're not just cultural Adventists, but we know that God loves us, and we are determined to be God's loving representatives to us. We know truth not just as a concept, but as something that transforms our lives. This is what a young person said. After leaving the church, I don't see I could go back. I feel like my beliefs are too different and would not fit into the mold. And they said, the only way I could see myself coming back is if I forced myself to conform to what the Adventist church wants me to be. Being conformed instead of catching a faith that's contagious. See the challenge there? Barna, in their study on millennials, also said this. One of the recurrent themes of this research, seen here as well as in the discussion groups, is that while Adventists seem to place great importance on outward behavior, such behavior is a poor indicator of their relationship with Christ. In other words, outward behavior didn't indicate whether they were having an internal experience. Time and again, Barna says, we heard from young adults who are deepening their relationship with Christ and people in the church during a time when their outward behaviors are not in conformity to the church. So they are actually growing closer to Jesus, but their behaviors don't represent that. In many cases, they conclude, they will later become further committed to the lifestyle doctrines, standards of Adventist doctrine, but only after internalizing them rather than conforming to them. What we need to do is teach a faith that is internal rather than a faith that is external, a faith that is not based on outward behaviors, but a faith that is based on an inward relationship with Jesus Christ. Third gap, compassion. What I heard from a lot of people in the surveys, we just don't seem to care. Oh, SDAs say that they love people, one person said, but what you find is they judge people and they find texts that justify that judgment and call it love. Others mentioned hurt from the church, burnout, religious trauma. One person said, I'm gay. Another said, I'm lesbian. They said, the church hates me. The church doesn't care about me. We have a compassion gap. Does the church care? One young person said, I went to church. They were very interested in my becoming part of the church. I participated, but then I burnt out. And when I burnt out, nobody cared. They only seemed to be interested in filling up positions with someone who would do everything. Do we care about the young adults in our church? Barna says, despite being digital natives, relational connection is lacking for most young adults. This is the most connected generation and the most lonely generation. So what do you think would bring young people back? What do you think would help them to come back to the church? Well, what I discovered in my survey was so surprising. I said, if you're open to coming back to the church, what would enable you to come back? And you know what they said? If the church cared about social issues. That was shocking. I didn't expect that. That the number one reason why they would come back if they felt the church cared, and if they were less proud, and if they were confident that God was leading. So I think we need to think about how we can effectively reach them and help them to care. Fourth gap, the engagement gap. In the engagement gap, this means that a lot of people are finding like there's not a place for them to get involved in the church. You know, we have adventurers, we have pathfinders, we have AY, but then what? Nothing. One person said, my name was taken off the books because I hadn't contacted the local church. No one bothered to find me. No one tried to see if I could use prayer or some help. In our area, another person said, Adventism is very much catch and release. Well, is that how we want it to be? Barna's study said, one of the strengths of the Adventist church is that they have many opportunities for children and youth to be involved. But there's a difficult transition from child to adult. Young adults have fewer opportunities. As one person in our post-college discussion group said, if you want a child and don't have a child, there's nothing for you. So we've talked about a lot of gaps. Do you remember what they are? We need to be willing to become authentic. We need to teach our identity. We need to help people have a place to process their doubts, to make their faith rational. We need to care for youth in the community and especially show understanding of social issues that they care about. And we need to engage young people. We need to engage young adults in the church so that they have a place to make a difference. Are you willing to be committed to helping young adults become the bright future of the church that they already are? Are you willing to make a difference in their lives by mentoring them, by connecting with them, by helping them to process their doubts, by showing them that you care? If we do this, I believe that the future is bright. But the door is closing. The gap is there. Are we willing to step into the gap and to help young adults become the incredible future and present of the church?
I remember when my son was 8 years old. My wife was the youth director for the church, and they had an activity with all the teenagers of that local congregation. They had several cars full of kids. You know how it is. We go and have some fun, and then we gather back at the church, and all the parents pick up their kids. On the way home, my wife had to drop off several of the teenagers. So they got in the car and they drove, and she was dropping people off. And all of a sudden, she got a phone call. And on the other line, my son said, "Mom, you left me." My wife had put in the car all the teenagers and drove off, and my son, who was 8 years old, was left back at the church. He's never forgotten that experience. We laugh about it now.